Corrie, born as Corazon, but I prefer to be called Corrie because a lot of people tend to baptize me and call me Horizon. A lover of books. I've been loving books ever since I started reading Peter and Jean. And then I love communication, I love writing. So I'm in the communication space, specifically climate communication.
Yeah.
So other than that, I am a huge basketball fan. Played basketball for 7 years. I know, with my height.
Okay.
I was a point
Yeah,
guard.
I didn't talk about your height. You spoke about it, so you have to say.
I was a point guard. I am a huge Warriors fan. I'm one of those people who wakes up at 4. I love music. I love to dance. I am a mix of God, family, books, basketball, and friendships.
I want to understand something a little bit. So when you say you're a climate communications specialist, what is that? What does that mean?
So what that entails is, so basically, communication is many things. So strategic communication, ideally, I lean towards the strategic communication bit where linking the media with the right people to tell the right stories of Africa. So also debunking myths around climate. Another thing is also doing a lot of climate diplomacy. So what that means is we don't live in a bubble. Like the issues of climate the way they affect Kenya is the same way they're going to affect another country. Let's say like Malawi, which was recently affected by cyclones. So looking at what are some of the policies that Malawi is enforcing? What are some of the policies that Kenya is enforcing? Are we working together to ensure that we're creating the same solutions? And so how comms comes in is I repackage this messaging to a way that when I'm talking to someone who doesn't understand things of climate, they will understand what I'm talking about, which is if we're saying that the simple things as, planting trees and things like that, are we doing it together? What's the sustainability component of it? Are we saying we're planting trees and leaving them? Or do we have a sustainability plan that can actually sustain these plants or rather these trees, until they're all grown and everything? So it's a mix of very many things. So there's media relations, there's strategic communication, which means that you have to do things not just in an ad hoc way. You have to do things in a way that you're looking at the longer term goals, right?
Yeah.
There's so much in the mix of comms, and you even as someone who's in comms. There's so much that you have to do, but like everything that I do is storytelling, and I have to work with the media. I have to work with communities because they're the most affected. So even when I got into this space before, I was working at Red Cross and I did a lot of emergency communication. And what I felt was I need to do more beyond emergency. What are some of the things that we need to do as a communications person that changes things so that we don't need to get to that emergency point? Because even the likes of Red Cross, they do emergency, yes, but they also try to do things like mitigation, because you don't want to be responding to people. You also want people to be self-sustainable, people who can take care of themselves, protect themselves. And so for you to do that, you need narratives, you need stories that can change this. And when you table policies, whether it's in governments, in parliaments, when you talk about them in diplomacy events such as COP, the Africa Climate Summit, what are the narratives that are happening in there? So yeah, I think in a nutshell that is.
Yeah. So we'll get to the books. But now, as we conclude that, what is the biggest misconception that you've met people each and every day on the climate change conversations that each and every day you hear and you ask yourself, why would you say that? Having
traveled, when I was working with Red Cross, having traveled to the likes of the northern part of Kenya, where Mandera, Wajir, Garissa, Marsabit, and even living with these communities, documenting their stories, when you're there, you feel the effects of climate. You feel them. But when you're here in Nairobi, in this house, where it's cold, it's chilly, it's nice, where you have your sunscreen, you have your, you don't feel, it feels like a far-fetched thing. And privilege is a very interesting thing, because I have met people say, climate, by the way, isn't it stories? You guys are just looking for money, or you guys are just telling us stories. You're just looking, you're being busy. But when you go to the communities and see how communities are affected, it is no longer a thing of just being busy. It is a thing of we need to do something. So for me, that is the one thing that I have experienced and encountered and a lot of people will probably say these things that climate is a story. It's not a story. People are dying because of climate.
Yeah.
People are lacking food. And when you go and live with communities who don't have food, you who can order Glovo, you can, walk into a restaurant and go and eat. There are people who don't have that. There are people who have to boil some weeds and stuff. And you go and live with these communities. You can't eat that. But this is their reality.
Yeah.
So climate it's here. I don't know whether it will end anytime soon. Something has to be done.
Yeah.
There are people who are doing things, and hopefully we can scale it up.
So what is the role of this person who is watching us or listening to us today with this whole climate change conversation?
Climate change is an issue, that it is there. And we all have our role to play. It's in the small things. When we do grand things, like for me, I'd easily say I'm doing the grand thing of climate. But then there are the small things of, looking at things like plastics, things like watching what you eat. But then also something else that I'd say, it's also holding our leaders accountable. When we talk about, earlier we were talking about how climate is very political. Hold our leaders accountable in terms of these policies. You who's privileged, call on to our leaders to do something for that person out there. Because there's some communities where they've never even seen their political leaders. Those guys went and did their campaign. So I think the biggest thing is just hold our leaders accountable, but also do the best that you can in your own small way. We have children who are always planting trees. And I don't know when back in the day in school where we used to plant trees, sometimes you'd go back to those schools and find that the trees are really big, but also someone took care of them. So I think it's just do the small thing. Some people feel like maybe your thing is to do communication like me. Maybe your other thing is to do activism, like the likes of Elizabeth Oduti, the likes of Wangari Maathai. Karura exists because of her. So it's just in the small things. Yeah.
Corrie, I know we can speak about climate for...
And I don't want to talk about work.
But thank you for allowing us to come and have the privilege of looking.
My soulful wealth.
Yes. And interacting with your wealth.
Yeah.
How do you describe your shelf?
Oh my God. This is my comfort. This is my escape. This is a place where if I've had a terrible day, I will come and look at this shelf and I'll be like, you know what? It's fine. I'm going to be okay. Then I'll go sit there, watch my movies, but I'll always know. Like sometimes I can even watch a movie and just have a book there. I just look at that book. There's something that I feel like books rescue me. They rescue me from my mind. They rescue me from realities. Because life is a mess and we are a mess.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And actually, I'm really happy to sit here with you because I checked out your Twitter. It is book after book after book.
And basketball.
After book. And a bit
of basketball
here,
depending with the season.
Yeah. And a few friends here and there.
Yeah.
And were you always a reader or it's a habit you picked up along the way?
Ever since I learned how to spell, read, and write, I loved to read. I'll tell you something. I communicate best writing. When I was a child and I wanted something from Dad, whether it's a pencil, a textbook, or whatever, what I used to do was I'd go write a note and then I put it kwa saucer, under the saucer of his teacup. Then he'll come and he'll turn it and then he'll find a small letter like, Dad, please buy me a pencil, please buy me a book or whatever. And he used to tell me, talk, express yourself. But I felt like I wasn't very comfortable to express myself, to ask for things. But then that's also how, that bit of writing, it's also how I also fell in love with books. And my mom, when we were growing up, used to read for us. I don't know whether you can remember the books, bedtime stories. They were white in color.
Yes.
And then she used to read for us African stories. There's a book that was blue in color. And then I used to read a lot of Ladybird. Ladybird. I don't know whether you remember those books.
Yes.
Ladybird books.
I
Is
remember.
that Peter and Jane?
Yes.
And then I graduated from that and went to Goosebumps, which was the scariest book. And then I went to Sweet Valley High School, SVU. But yeah, so I started reading and also really influenced by my parents because my parents are teachers. So we always had books in the house, whether it's encyclopedia, whatever it was. And so that's just how I started to read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to take a journey through yourself. And
Ooh,
and as somebody who's had this, where we started with this whole conversation on environment and climate change, we cannot not talk about
We will not
Wangari
do
Maathai.
justice.
We cannot not talk about Wangari Maathai.
We gotta
So,
talk about her.
Tell me about Unbound.
Oh, wow. It is that. Just as it sounds, unbowed. I regret never having met Wangari Maathai. I regret. And I feel like this is a woman I would have loved to meet. Not even just meet, to be in the same room with. Atakama, she's there, we are 2,000 people. To just be in the same air, the same space, same presence, just her presence. So Unbowed is a book that I can't even remember how I got it. But when I love reading memoirs. And at some point I was like, listen, I haven't read Kenyan memoirs that, I read The Fifth Estate by the late, the one with a lot of English who used to write in the Daily Nation. What was his name? Ocheng. There was that author, I keep forgetting his name. And I was like, I need to read another book and it has to be a woman. So when I picked Unbowed and I started reading it, I couldn't stop. I remember this one Sunday, I just sat and I was just flipping and I was like, I really admire who Wangari Maathai is. And I admire her zeal, I admire her resilience, I admire her strength, but also at the same time, I admire her vulnerability. And for me, I really relate with vulnerability, just the things of shame, And in this book, it's not just a book that talks about her fight for the environment. It's a book that talks about her family. It's a book that talks about her divorce. It's a book that talks about how many times she was arrested, humiliated by the Moi regime. And then you realize, and when we were talking, and I said climate is very political, her fighting for Karura Forest, her fighting for our park, this went beyond it just being a park. It was also about, who are you, you woman?
Yeah.
How dare you speak? We will show you. And that really affected the way she talks about it in the book. It affected her marriage. It affected her friendships. And sometimes the hard things in life, the things that you have to fight for, sometimes you have to lose. And I was reading that book and I was like, is it that serious? Do you love this country this much that you have to barricade yourself in the house in South Sea with cops surrounding it? Do you love us this much? And I struggle because I'm like, I don't think I can be like her.
Yeah. And you say something interesting because if you think about, I've not read the book, but I think I've read a lot about Wangari Maathai being the first East and Central African woman to get
get doctorate.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also just being the first Black woman to win a Nobel Peace Prize. But then you look at people are quick to look at those things, but we don't see the fight. Rarely do people talk about the fight. I remember one image of her having been beaten and
she had blood. Her hair was...
And I think that time she was fighting for Uhuru Park.
Yeah.
Do you think that we have activists today who would go to those extents?
Wow. I think we do, but we also don't. Because life as it is, you have to protect yourself, you have to take care of yourself. And so a lot of these people were very selfless. When you look at Wangari Maathai, she was very selfless. Like one of the examples is when her friends, is it like her friends, or there were women who their sons had been arrested, and what they did is that they went to the streets. And I remember, I think, I hope I'm not getting this wrong, she talks about the church. I don't know whether it's Holy Family, or there's a church in town, or there's Holy Family, and then there's another church that it is Anglican, the Anglican church in town, that was actually like sort of like hosting them, you know. And I'm like, you've left your house, you've gone to Saidia these women, their sons have been arrested. You must be so selfless. I think whether we have activists, honestly, there are, but whether, and I don't think they're very, I believe they're selfless, but Wangari Maathai just defines some selflessness to a level of sacrifice, of take me, shoot me, but you know what? I'm going to stand for this.
And she also ran for president.
And she did. Did she? I think she ran.
I think she ran. I remember.
Did she?
Was I? Yes, I must have been. I remember. Well, you know, the election results used to be counted live on radio, and I remember.
You're telling us your age, eh?
I've stayed for quite some time. I've been around for some time, so I remember votes being counted, and there are places where they would say Wangari Maathai kura moja. That audio is still very fresh in my ear. I can't remember in which election. Must have been 1997.
Yeah.
I think so. And when you look at maandamano today, we are in the era of maandamano. Is it the same thing from your perspective?
There's a lot of shame that comes with sacrifice. And that shame is you running for a political seat and the shame of people knowing you got one vote. There's a lot of shame that comes with wanting to change things. And we live in a world where we're so woke. We overthink things. Like now I'm overthinking everything. How am I seated? How am I talking? How am I, you know? And we care so much about these things. I don't know whether it's because there's so much noise that happens. And I just think that, and to be honest, even just going to the streets, if people are called to go to the streets, hey, I'll think about so many things. I'll be like, wait, ni wapi? Navaa viatu gani? Okay, ni route gani? Kina nani wanakuja kwa hiyo nini? Kwa hiyo protest? You know, I'm going to think about a lot of things. I'm going to overthink so many things. I feel like people like Wangari, it was, what is it? What's the issue? Let's go. Let's go do this. No. We cannot accept this. It's such an admirable thing. There's a lot of shame that comes with it because the shame of defeat. Then there's a lot of fear of, I'm going to lose something. You can lose your life. You can lose your job. Nowadays, we live in an age where
against the government.
Everybody's on their phone. So you're there on the streets, you're protesting. Then your boss somewhere who's partnering with the government be like, listen, why are you going to the streets? Why are you going to protest? And there's a lot of fear that comes with it. But then there's a lot of, I think, privilege and comfort. Honestly, something that I also have. So it's a dicey one. It's a dicey one. That's why we have Lone Rangers.
Yes.
You have Lone Rangers like the Boniface Mwangi, you know.
Yeah.
You have people who are going to call people to go to the streets and people will be like, keyboard warriors, talk say their hashtag, you know. Yeah, and I'm not saying that I am someone who goes to the streets. I'm not saying that, that, I'm bold and I can go there no matter how much I'm talking about it. But it's just something that we struggle with. And it's something that I struggle with. Because I'm like, I want to change the world. I'm changing it in my own way. But look at this woman. Yeah. But
as we conclude, what is that one outstanding thing for you in that?
Oh my God, there's so many. You know, I have a thing about books. I have a thing about books where I really highlight things. So let me just, you see the thing, like I'll just open the book and then I'll say something. So when you're talking about fear, right? So this is chapter 10, where it's often difficult to describe to those who live in a free society what life is like in an authoritarian regime. You don't know who to trust. You worry that you, your family, or your friends will be arrested and jailed without due process. The fear of political violence or death whether through a direct assassination or targeted accidents, is constant. Such was the case of Kenya, especially during the 1990s.
Yeah.
Can you imagine her doing that in the 90s? I don't think, right now, I think a lot is sort of like caged, right? You won't find that happening. But then let me read for you something that, maybe there's so many gems in this book. So every experience has a lesson. So this was in the context of, let me see, when she was in university. Every experience has a lesson. Every situation has a silver lining. Each person needs to raise their consciousness to a certain level so that they will not give or succumb. If your consciousness is at such a level, you are willing to do what you believe is the right thing. Popular opinion notwithstanding. Amen.
But you've spoken about fear, you've spoken about loss, but I don't think that is far away from, for example, Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton.
What happened?
Oh my goodness, that's a book I read. Let me tell you, that's a brilliant book. I'll just open something when I did the review of that book. I love this book because she writes about defeat. She writes about defeat in the most raw way and shame that comes from her being the very first woman who was sort of like the whole world was looking at. Is she going to be the first? Is she going to be the first president? So this is, just allow me to read. I think it will just summarize to anyone who hasn't read, the book. I'll try and read very fast. So this is what happened, Hillary Clinton. The past leaves residue, especially when competition is thick. Those damn emails. So this is a review that I wrote, as Hillary puts it. And the commie effect circling the whole investigation was pivotal and high-degree catalyst to her 2016 presidential election loss. What happened is the most authentic memoir I have ever read. It's painful to lose, especially if you knew you could win. It's deflating to realize how so much hate and vitriol can reduce any component of documented success to merely that, documented. Hillary has poured her heart bare for us. Hillary has poured her heart out bare for us to know how those moments of loss and surgical criticism did to her. This is a book for anyone interested in the politics of female leaders and the biases that underestimate our worth. It is a book of many things: a digital age that defines a gender, a class into policy formations and the dynamics of change in an era of disparities, economic, social, or otherwise, a display of resilience and kindness in times of contest, but above all, one woman's story of her flaws, desires, and truths. Yeah. This is a woman who was running for president. She ran for president the first time, I believe, in 2008. Before that, there was a whole scandal of, her husband. So you can imagine. And then Hillary is not your, how do I put this? People say that she comes off as very masculine, And those are things that she writes about in the book. She writes about even how she had to change the way she dresses. And it's a book of, I don't know how she did it, honestly. Like, it's a book, I cried. Like, I was reading it and I was like, I'm not looking at it as a woman, as an American woman. She's a very privileged woman. I'm not looking at it as an American woman who's very privileged, but I'm looking at it as a woman who got defeated and just got defeated by a madman. Like, listen, people opted for a madman over you. I genuinely just think that any woman who wants to get into leadership at whatever capacity, whether it's corporate, in an organization, in an NGO, in politics, they just need to read how defeat feels like, because running for these things comes with shame.
And you've spoken about loss. Do you think we're taught how to deal with loss? Who teaches us how to deal with loss?
I don't think we're taught how to deal with loss, because ever since we were children and with our education system, it's like, Okonamba. Then you're also compared to, look at Fulani's child.
Yes.
they're winning in like mathematics and whatever. Or you, even in church, like how you're behaving. Or why are you not going to sing in front? And, things like that.
Yeah.
Why are you not doing all these activities in sports? You have to be the best. And you don't know how to deal with it. Because the moment that you feel loss, it's like you get depression. And even, I think the word depression for me is like a thing I knew maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. Growing up, you'd have those moments of depression, but you did not know, what was happening to you. And the thing is, with loss, when you're not taught how to deal with loss, you don't know how to pick yourself up. There are people that I know who were not A students in high school. They were C students, D students.
Yeah.
They ended up like finding themselves post-high school. And they are in industries of some of those subjects where they failed. But you see, they had to figure it out. So we are not taught how to deal with loss.
You say something very interesting. That if you're not taught how to deal with loss, it becomes very difficult
to pick yourself up.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that is the situation that most of us young people today are going through?
That's why we indulge. We don't know how to deal with it. Because, so I've lost a job. I've lost, I don't know, whatever. How do I deal with it? I'll indulge. I'll go to extremes. I will, it depends on what your extreme is.
Yeah.
Is it extreme drugs? Is it alcohol? Is it overindulging with relationships? Because you don't know, you're trying to figure it out. And as I say this, I don't know how to deal. I know how to deal with loss, but I have my moments of extreme self-destruction where I'm like, oh shit, I am actually really heading to a wrong path. I need to figure myself out and come back. But then that's why for me, I am very careful with who is around me, because I have to say, I lay myself bare. This is me. This is how much of a mess I am. And I don't know what to do. And if I don't talk about it, I'm going to go to an extreme of something that I don't know whether I'll ever come back from it.
Yeah. There's been so many instances of late, and I like where you say you might have been going through depression in your younger self and you didn't even know what you're going through. And today the conversations on mental illness have become pronounced, and people are coming out to speak about them. But is there a way that being taught certain things as a child would have helped most of us in dealing with situations, and especially loss? You look at the number of very many people who lost their lives because they lost a job, they lost a loved one, they lost a lover, especially. And the things that subsequently follow those are detrimental. How important is it for us to learn or be taught how to deal with the loss?
Wow, I don't know whether it's even a thing of being taught. I think it's a thing of just building foundations within yourself where you allow yourself to know that shame is not the worst thing that can happen. And that's the thing, because I remember what I was telling you earlier. I didn't have a job for 9 months, and it's not something that people would be proud to talk about. And even in the moment and in the process of going through it. But I had to learn to deal with it. And that's how life sort of comes into a full circle of your vulnerability, your fears, and your shame. But I think it's a thing you have to learn. I don't think you have to learn, but then you also have, it's an individual thing. It's like telling someone who's going through a heartbreak, wachana na yeye, amekufanya hivyo, leave that person. You don't know what that person is going through.
Yeah.
So how you've given them the solution,
Let me ask you a hard one. How do you deal with the loss?
How do I deal with loss?
Yeah.
Depends what kind of loss. Let's get deep.
Which is the hardest loss you've had to deal with?
Loss of trust. That's the hardest thing that I was telling a friend the other day that I think there was a seed that was planted of loss of trust in me by someone who really hurt me so bad. And because I was never someone who would worry about issues of trust. And sometimes I admire naivety. I admire people who are naive because I'm just like, you don't have to deal with this shit. But the thing is, for me, it was trust. Losing the idea or just the contentment of trusting people. That thing just messed me up because I'm always working on eggshells around people, whether it's friends, potential lovers, people who are, whether it's a workplace, I'm always like, what's your intention? You know? So how I deal with it now is I'm very self-aware. I write a lot. These are I had diaries. I have a diary for God. I have a diary for
the next time we come, we'll read the diaries.
Well, so I write a lot and I speak a lot. Like I tend to speak a lot. I don't like to hide. I realized in hiding, the devil thrives in isolation. Yeah. So in hiding, when you hide, you now have to deal with your mess by yourself in your head. So I tend to get it out there. Because losing of trust encompasses many things. I've lost friendships because of my own toxicity, because of, trust and whatever and all those things. And I'm like, good riddance. I mean, I know at that point I'm a terrible person, but let me try and figure like this life out. So, yeah.
And that transitions so well to the next conversation. There's something you've posted today
Ooh.
on your status. Which one is that?
The book, A Broken People's Playlist.
This one?
Yes, by Chimeka Garrix. So that's
This one will
okay. Oh, so cool. So this is a short stories book that I started reading maybe 2 weeks ago. It's a beautiful, tragic book.
Beautiful,
tragic book, yeah.
Right.
Tragic because it's a book of loss of so many things. It's a book of loss of love. It's a book of loss of jobs. It's a book about loss of not just love relationship-wise, but also love family-wise. It's a book of abuse. It's a book of, there are beautiful things inside there. It's a mashup of many things. Like I was reading this book and I was like, is this guy like writing my life? And I'd catch myself panicking at my own reality. Like I'm reading a book and I'm like, oh my God, this is me. This is what I'm going through. But I'll tell you something. Every time I read a book like this, a book that makes me sort of like have like an introspective moment of thinking about my life and my realities, I end up making solid decisions in my life. So that's the thing. I don't know whether it's a good thing or it's a bad thing. You know the way people say, you had a song, alafu, that song made you, call someone and feel, and then that moment is going to like, why did I do that? You're just in a moment, but that is not me with books. So like this book, I just love the stories in there. The stories of love, loss, abuse, damaged people. I connect with damaged people because I believe I'm damaged. And I believe that I'm always someone who's like trying to figure life out. So yeah, so and also the beautiful thing about the book, even when you open the first page, it's a book, it's 13 stories based on songs. So Chimeka, he talks about how he struggled through trying to figure out his second book. I haven't read his first book, but how he struggled to write the second book. And like he was listening to music and each song inspired him, from Adam Levine to Nina Simone to Yemi Alade. So each story there is based on a song. Do I have a favorite story there? I think I do. What will be? I think I do it like maybe 3, but
what is your favorite?
Oh my God, I don't know. Do I have a favorite? No, but there's a story. There's just a story. There are just stories about. There's a story that he talks about this couple that actually divorced, and when they divorced, the way this guy was, like sleeping around with everyone, he was drinking alcohol, he was an alcoholic and all that. And one time they realized some of the underlying issues, things that he went through, getting raped by the house help at 7 years old. And, for him, he's saying things like, listen, so he's telling the ex-wife, like, because she ended up learning that he was raped when he was a child. And he says, I don't feel like it was rape because I was enjoying it. But listen, you were 7 years old. So he started enjoying it when he was 10. And so he says that, like, it's not her fault. But, like, when you look at it, you were a child. So in as much as it wasn't where you feel like you need to justify this, it was her fault, Yeah. And so they talk about just the issues and the way, some of the things that actually led to the kind of person that he was. And I just love how this book sometimes, the book and some of the stories, they left me hanging. I'm like, oh, okay, fine. Is he going to go back to become an alcoholic or not? There's no finality with each book because that's reality. Akuna, like the book ends at a full circle of realization. This is a problem, Whether after that he's going to go hit the bar and drink or, so it's a book that it doesn't give you a conclusion.
Yeah.
And that's how life is. Because sometimes we like happy endings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually relates to what you said earlier, because sometimes today you're a result of very many things that have happened in your past that I don't think people get to see them from your point of view. And today, for example, you're saying you have a problem with this trust issue. And it is unfortunate to the person who is coming into your life at this stage.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so many of us have, how do I call it? I don't want to call them scars, but you have things that happened to you that shaped the way you look at things, that unfortunately people who come into your life,
they have to suffer the baggage.
Yeah,
they suffer through your baggage.
But do you think in fact, do you think we have an opportunity to always talk about those things? Because sometimes people fear to lose, because sometimes I wonder if I would tell you this thing, are you still going to look at me the same way?
I love that question. Listen, I love it because I'm that person. On the first date, I'll just say, I'm not going to come there looking like, I'm not going to bring the best version of me. I've been so damaged to a point where I don't give an F. Like, I will come there raw. And raw means the conversations that I'm going to have. And I'm always willing to, like, this person is not going to call me the following day, probably. Whatever. The other day, I even told a friend of mine, we were joking. And I'm going to say this on a podcast. So she said, I was telling her, we're doing this trip. And I said, you know what? I'd love for a man to come and say, I just love you for who you are. With your mess, with your issues of trust, with your paranoia. I just love that. And I hope that you can allow me to be in your life. We can deal with it. That means you have to talk to people. You have to say these things. So, yeah.
But don't you think that if that would scare a potential suitor, you look at it as self-sabotage?
Oh, listen, good riddance. I am 37. I am 37 and I know, and I have gone through stuff in life. And sometimes, that's the thing, like shame. I'm no longer scared of shame. What's the worst that will happen? Isn't the worst this person discovering who I truly am than this person who I'm bringing? A while back, I'd always be like, oh, I'm macho, I'm da-da-da-da, boss lady, whatever. I am as vulnerable, as raw as they come. In fact, the one thing that I changed is stopping to post on my social media. I used to be those people who used to write feelings. I used to write poems until I realized that I also need to protect myself and to take those vulnerabilities to safe spaces.
Yeah.
Because not just everyone needs to know about your trash.
Yeah.
So,
and actually, that is what I was supposed to ask you next, because we live in an era of social media where people are bullied. People bully you with, those are realities. Somebody you don't know picks this fact from God knows where, runs with it.
Yeah.
Have you dealt with issues like that?
I haven't, fortunately. I haven't, because also, like I was telling you, like my social media is very curated. So I think a lot of people would find my social media very boring. But I have seen people who've dealt with it. But I've also dealt with it in terms of just me being fearful of, I've put that out there. And then, so what happens? So what next?
Yeah.
But I think also just, honestly speaking, and one thing that I've realized, one thing that I have hacked is just being in safe spaces. And my safe spaces are one, my book club. My book club is a safe space. We've been together for 6 years. And then some of my friends. For the longest time, I was, as an adult woman, one of the things that we really yearn for is sane friendships. Sometimes not even authentic, at least sane. Because authenticity sometimes means that you have to put your shame out there. Not many people are willing to do that. Just sane friendships where you feel safe. That's one of the things that I really longed for. And I know right now, even as I'm setting my table of, like friendships and whatever, I'm at a very good space where I can speak and say things that I will never dare say. Those deep things, those deep fears, those things, those moments of pride. Because I remember even I was talking to a friend and I was telling her, 3 weeks ago, I had such a moment of pride and I was saying things and I was like, oh God, why did I say that? I had such a human moment of pride.
Yeah.
But for me to go and talk about it and to tell someone, listen, I did 1, 2, 3, 4. It's because of that. Yeah. And with that, I will take you to this book. It's by Oprah. It's What I Know for Sure. So this book is, I love Oprah. I never used to be a big Oprah fan when I grew up, but as I was growing up. But like this book is really like about vulnerability and shame and friendships and God. And I was reading it and I was like, we all go through the same things. It doesn't matter whether you're a billionaire woman or whether you're a woman living smack in the middle of Nairobi somewhere,
Yeah.
What
Tell
I know
us
for
about
sure.
what do you know for sure?
What I know for sure is you have to be in safe spaces to survive. You have to be in safe spaces to survive. Whether you want to talk about your failures, whether you want to talk about your successes without worry, without feeling like you're being prideful.
What is safe? What is a safe space?
A safe space is where you can say something without fear of getting judged, without fear of being labeled something, without fear of leaving that presence and going to ask yourself questions of, why did I say that? Why did I talk about this? Safe is you talking to these people that you are with later and saying, that was a good conversation or that was a good moment.
Who makes it safe?
Oh, it starts with yourself. You must make it safe for people. That's the thing. And it's hard work. It is hard work. Because I have, going back to the whole trust and paranoia, I've had spaces where I have made it safe for people, but they've not made it safe for me. So then now you have to start all over again. It's a lot of work. Listen, it's a lot of work. It's taken me years, probably a decade, for me to get to where I am when it comes to friendship. And I'm like, I'm at a very good place right now. 1, 2, 3 girlfriends, good. Safe spaces like my book club, other spaces where I feel like I am safe.
Yeah.
Because it is these spaces that actually define you, and they're actually the spaces where they make you be motivated to be. Whether you're in career, when you're working and you have a lot of things happening in your head, you can't fulfill your duties as expected. But then when you're safe, like you have some sort of a safe haven somewhere, whether it's in friendships, you're content. There's that, like something has to work. If your career is not working, if your financial things are not working, something has to work. And for me, it's that safety. That just has to
There's
work.
a young girl out there, perhaps, who was at a place where you were, who don't know the things you know for sure. What would be that thing? And how would you unstuck this young girl?
And you're not telling them to get out there and be character developed. First of all, just know yourself. That's the most important thing, because we're always chasing for that instant gratification of what next. What's the next big thing in life? And you completely forget to deal with yourself. To get to where I am, I had to deal with my toxicity that I am still dealing with. Things that I probably might not even talk about here, but I had to deal with my toxicity. I had to deal with my nonsense, because I had too much nonsense. I had to deal with those things. And for you to get to a place where you unpack and find your safe spaces is you have to know, first of all, you need to know what safe is by dealing with yourself.
Corrie, you're such a good vibe. And I'm asking myself, where did toxic come from? Where did nonsense come from?
That's a good question. Insecurity. I'll talk about something the other day. Earlier I was telling you about the campaign we did, My Black is Beautiful, which this photo is part of. And then that photo there, I don't know whether you can see it. You can see the photo that looks all macho with me.
That's you?
Looking like Wakanda. No, not on the wall, not the painting, on the... What are you trying to say?
I was like, I've landed on one of them.
No. I'm talking about that other one, yeah?
Really
so it's insecurity. So that's where it comes from, because you have so much insecurity that you become someone else. And so growing up, I always thought Black is not beautiful. Do I still deal with the issues of my beauty? 100%. I think every day I deal with that. Am I beautiful enough? But it is through that insecurity that harbored and sort of like brought up a whole person that was very toxic, because I'd want to identify with who's the cool person, and I completely lose my authenticity. And what that means is I would easily backbite people, I would gossip people. I'd always be like, oh, so I'm with you this time, so I am winging with you now. But another time, if I'm with this person, I'm with this person. And I became such a very toxic human being that I was, you know, when you're so toxic and when you harbor so much negativity in you, it's like you're trash inside. And I had to do so many things I had to do. For me to come to that realization is through books. You know the way you watch a movie and you're rooting for a character? Like, mbona unaenda hivyo? Utashutiwa ukienda hivyo. Mbona huyu alifanya hivi? You're always rooting for someone, right? It's the same way even for me with books. Because the characters that I root for, I'm like, oh, I admire this character. And I was like, wait, if someone was going to read my book at this time, my book was written by someone who's watching my life. The way we know about like going to heaven and, you know, your life story is going to be read. What are they going to see? And now I started like working on myself. I'm not there yet, but I am a work in progress.
What worked for you? What is that thing that got you off the ground for you to build on?
I think it was just a moment of hurting so many people. And you realizing, because remember, with that kind of toxicity, you're a people pleaser. And then now, the people that you're pleasing are no longer getting pleased. So you're like, ooh. So it's a moment of that, it's a spin of that negativity of what you were to people that makes you realize, oh shit, I'm actually a terrible person. Like I need to sort of, you know, you go back and you're like, okay. First of all, you resent these people because it starts from that. Nobody likes to be told that they're imperfect. Nobody wants to be told that you've made a mistake. So it starts from there. So it was a point of resentment and also resenting myself. And I had to sort of, and I think it was at a point where I started really enjoying my own company because that meant I had to deal with myself. So yeah, it was just a point of hurting people and then getting to a point where I have to deal with myself.
Yeah. So you're talking about books, and books got you somewhere. How do you define your reading habits, and how do you determine what you're reading next?
My mood. Right now I'm reading romance.
Tell us something.
I'm reading romance. So it's how I'm feeling at that moment. So I have times where I'm going to go deep into investigative reporting. I'm going to read books written by journalists, investigative work, such as books like Bad Blood, which I don't have and I regret not having here, by John Carreyrou, I think that's how you pronounce his name. Or this, When McKinsey Comes to Town, which is written by by some New York journalists. Or Blood and Oil, written by journalists as well. There are times that I'll want to read a memoir where I want to be inspired and I'm going to pick Viola Davis or Audacity of Hope or Samantha Power's book. Then there are times where I just want to read something bloody and I want to read a thriller and I want to read about psychos. I want to read about people killing each other and, trying to figure out who's the murderer at the end of the book. And then there are times where I have moments of, oh my God, I just want to read a romance. Like right now, after I read Broken People's Playlist, because it's such a tragic book, I needed a happy book. And so that's why I'm reading like a romance. But then now my next book is my first big book. It's The Covenant of Water. I think that is the book up there.
This one?
That one. Can you see how big it is?
This is so huge.
It is so huge.
It's an encyclopedia.
I know, right? So this is my next book. After I do the romance, I'm reading this book. But the reason why I'm reading this book is because my friend reached out to me and he was like, Corrie, let's read this book together. And I was like, are you serious? We're going to read a big book? And he's like, and he loves big books. And I was like, okay, you know what? I've never had a reading buddy, so I'm like, sure, let's do this. But let me first read the romance and then we get on that. But the font is good. The font is not bad.
It's not bad.
Yeah, the font is not bad. Yeah. And it's a historical fiction, and I love historical fiction.
So which is this romantic book you're reading?
Oh no, I'm reading such a silly book in my Kindle here. It's called Part of Your World. It's one of those books where, oh my God, she meets her Prince Charming. They like each other, then they don't like each other, then they fight, then their friends bring them back together. And it's a happy ending. It's like a very, those things, you need pick-me-ups. Sometimes you just need pick-me-ups. Yeah. And especially the kind of week that I've had with work and all, you just need pick-me-ups.
All right.
Yeah.
And that brings a very interesting book. Where is your husband?
Where is your husband, Corrie? Where is your husband? Yeah. This is a book that we read as a book club. I think, was it last year? Yeah, we read this book as a book club. It's a good book. It's a book about Yinka, who is a woman who is a VP in her organization. No, she wanted to be a VP in her organization, but she lives in London and her aunties are always like, Yinka, where's your husband? When they go for meetings and those events over the weekend, like our Rurashio kind of things. Yinka, where's your husband? We're going to pray. And they used to pray, by the way, in the middle of praying for food. They're like, hey, and pray for Yinka, to get a husband. And then she has her sister or her cousin? Her sister is married. And then a cousin of hers goes and gets married. So it's just a book that talks about the 30-something-year-old woman who lives in the African society setup and is under pressure to get married, under pressure to get a man. And not just any man. You have to get a man with the right things, the right money, the right status and things like that. But that wasn't her. That is not. In fact, the man that she ended up with is a man who just not the right status, like a man, she's a corporate girl. And she ended up with like a guy who, I think was it in arts or whatever, something. But yeah, so it's just a book about, and it also talks about women and the pressures that they have. So it talks about a place where she had to go and buy a wig to like, is this what beauty is? And to go and bleach herself. Like she started buying products where she needs to bleach herself so that she can be lighter and so that she can really be that girl who stands out. So yeah, it's a story of the everyday 30-something-year-old woman who is single and is expected to have married. And if is not married, there's something wrong with you.
Is it a reality?
Oh, it is a reality. Yeah. Not my reality, but it is a reality. My reality is I am fortunate enough not to have parents who are not like persistent. Oh, when are you bringing your husband and all that? But it is a reality when I sit with people, like even some older people like the age of our parents, and you sit with them and they're going to ask, hey, tunakuja kukula pilau lini? When are we coming to eat rice? When are we coming to eat food? And what that means is where is your husband?
Yeah.
And you try to explain. So sometimes nowadays I just say, I don't have, show me where these guys are. So sometimes, sometimes I just put them, I just put a stop to it. There are other people, I just decide, like, there's a time I went to a wedding and someone came up to me, some at the age of my mom, and she came up to me and she said, Nayako Ikolini, when is your wedding? And I said, oh, I'm not getting married. And she was like, why? Because I don't want to. That's not the truth. I want to get married. I want to have children. But then I was just like, let me piss you off. Let me see actually what you're going to say. She couldn't speak anymore after that. And I was like, that's the line. Then I'm actually going to be using that line. But it is the reality. And if you're not confident with who you are, you don't have safe spaces to talk about these things. Because we talk about the fears. Because people are like, you're 37. In 3 years, you're turning 40. So how about children? Are you going to get children when you're 40? But what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to hurry God's plan? Because I am someone who's aligned with God's plan. I'm someone who, I don't make my decisions. I allow God to make them. And sometimes in our busyness, sometimes we miss God's path. And I'm always like, God, okay, if I'm missing your path, whatever. Is it a priority? Do I think about it? Do I say like, oh gosh, I want a husband or whatever? No, not every day. I have my moments of being lonely, but I'm okay. When it happens, it happens.
Most of the time, people say men worry about the financial clock. Women worry about the biological clock. Does it hit you at some point? You worry about the biological clock?
It does, but not that much. Not really, to be honest. Do I worry that I don't have children running around the house? No. Because listen, I am so in tune with God that I'm like, if I lost you somewhere where you needed me to have those children then your plan is still there. And sometimes the plan is you might get kids, you might not get kids. So you can spend your time worrying or you can spend your time living in the best way that you can. And hopefully you're going to get the blessing that you want.
What is your take in the society's expectation on, with that question, where is your husband?
I think the society should mind their business. I think they need to mind their business. Like, seriously, what is your life that boring that you have to sit and worry whether I have a husband or not? What is your purpose in life? I think the society just needs to mind their damn business.
All right.
For me.
So do you have any favorite books?
I do. I love Samantha Power, The Education of an Idealist. I love Samantha Power because she started as a journalist, an immigrant in America. And when you Google who Samantha Power is and her story, it's so relatable. I'm like, you're an ordinary woman. I love stories of ordinary women who become extraordinary things. I love Viola Davis's book, Finding Me. I love that book because the shame, the vulnerability, oh my God, how dare you write that? I love that. I love memoirs, but I also love Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. It's the first, it's not the first historical book that I've read, but historical fiction rather. But I just love the fact that I have never read about Korea, Japan, Tokyo. I've never read about the war in that side. So it's a book that actually unpacks that. And now I'm a huge fan of K-drama. Influenced by my sisters, but I watch a lot of K-drama. I love reading speeches. So there's a book, Outspoken, 50 Speeches by Incredible Women, because I love to write a lot. There was a point in my life I really used to write a lot of speeches. I hope to get back to that.
So it's actually, what is it? Is it a step?
It's just speeches.
Oh,
yeah,
speeches.
It's just speeches, like defining moment speeches. So like I think there's a speech there by Michelle Obama. I think was it the second term of when Obama was president, second term. There's a speech by Greta Thunberg.
Do you have like a favorite speech?
Oh goodness, do I? Oh God, it has to be really an outlier. I think. Let me see. Oh, I just love this. So many. Oh, God. I loved so many speeches in this book. There's Oprah Winfrey's speech. So they're all defined like about your body, say it, like speak it, love, boys will be allies. So it's what we were talking about. There's a speech by Emma Watson that talks about the he for she campaign that I was telling you about by UN Women, end of white supremacy, war in taxes. Okay, do we have I feel I'm under pressure. Oh, like, hey, oh gosh, Corrie, find one. But because we're being very authentic right now, I cannot pick a speech that was my favorite at this moment because I've not gone to this book to like check the speeches again.
Yeah.
But I loved a lot of the speeches. I also love Havoc of Choice. Havoc of Choice by Wanjiru Koinange is a historical fiction about Kenya and post-election violence. I think it's one of the best books that talks about... Okay, I've not read another book that talks about post-election violence, but a fiction book written by a Kenyan. And apparently, if she's listening and then she hears I've I've said it wrong, but apparently it was her master's project. That book is divine. It is so well written. It is so good. And especially us living through the post-election violence time, you read it and you actually feel like she did justice. She did justice to that story. Let me see. I loved Evelyn Hugo, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Taylor Jenkins Reid. So this is a book that talks about this woman in Hollywood and just tells you the story of Hollywood, who had like 7 husbands, short-term married. One was gay, then they had to get married because, listen, you can't say you're gay at that particular time. The other one was a one-night stand. It's just a book that is fun to read. It's just one of those books. And then at the end of the book, you find that she's a lesbian and you're like, eh? You had 7 husbands and then Allah. So it's, The Sex Lives of African Women by Nana. We read it as a book club. I love this book because I've never seen women speak about their sexuality in the way that they speak about it in the book. And these are not things that people will speak about loud. They'll only speak about it in safe spaces. But then, of course, these are stories that are told with anonymity. But it's also like, I just admired how women can be very bold about their sexual desires. Because we assume that, hey, we don't have those things. Those things are not ours. Say we don't have those feelings. But reality is we do.
What was that one thing that even you as a woman were like, yeah?
No, I think it's just
happens?
there wasn't like one thing. But it was just the fact that women can actually talk about their desires, whether it is in marriage, whether it is in dating. It's just them opening up and just talking about it. For me, that's just the one thing. Because even within friendships, like when you talk about sex, even with friends, it's like, oh, it's trashy, it's whatever. Sometimes you just have to talk about it. And for me, that was a book I was like, okay. But it also comes with a lot of safety because you as a woman to even give Nana your story, you've overcome so much shame that you're okay to talk about it. I mean, there are a lot of fetish things in there that I'm like, that I can't talk about. You go read for yourself. Nuri is selling it, Somanam is selling it. This is me promoting local bookstores.
Yeah.
But,
Do you have any book you've ever hoped so much to read and then it got disappointed?
Oh my goodness. Is there? I have books here that I'm worried that they disappoint me, but a book, some fiction books, I'm just like, why? Like I struggle with them. I start reading them and I'm like, Allah, no. Can I remember? You see, that's the thing about reading so many books. I think it's a lot of thrillers. A lot of thrillers that I read, sometimes I'm just like, why did I pick this book? Others have just given them 1 star. I'm like, one for effort, for writing a book, because writing a book is not easy.
Yeah.
So I think fiction books, fiction thriller books have done that to me. They've really character developed me.
Do you have like any favorite authors or something?
Do I have favorite? That's a very good question because here's the thing about writing, and I think about authors. When an author writes one book, how many more books are they going to write? Like, I love Minjin Lee. She has 2 books, right? I'm waiting to see if there's going to be a 3rd one. So that's the thing. Like, with favorite authors, it's... Okay, I loved Khalid. Khalid Hosseini, right? You've read Khalid Hosseini?
Yeah.
Kaitrana, A Thousand Splendid Suns. I love Khalid Hosseini. But I also love because I think I don't have a favorite author. I think what I have is like an author and I love this book, because you can have a favorite author and then they write another book and you're like, hey, I'm not going to read that book.
Yeah.
But I have authors who I feel really got to me. So Khalid Hosseini got to me. Actually brought back my love for reading. I remember, was it in 2016 when I was reading A Thousand Splendid Suns, and I was in the matatu and I'm crying and I'm there like, unakani kama sijui ni nini, you've lost something, eh? And it's a book that's making you cry. But I love when books do that to me. So it's a thing.
What was it about that book? What made you cry?
Oh, Khalid, the A Thousand Splendid Suns. Oh gosh, just the struggle of Miriam. Like, really? And you know the thing is, both Kaitrana and A Thousand Splendid Suns, they're fiction, yes, but these are the realities of women either in Afghanistan or places, Yemen, places where there's war that's happening. And you read these books. Because so for me, because I really also watch a lot of TV, like I'm always, you know, the way people, like the credits go, hey, I'm always like, hey, who are the people who they consulted to? Because if it's an espionage movie, do they have ex-CIA, ex-FBI, and whatever, like. So like this, Khalid, him writing, it's like they're experts, like there are people who've gone through those situations, the war and all that. So you read, and I'm like, these people have to go through this? And for me, that's just a thing that just brings me back to my reality. Like, there's a war happening in Syria, and there's a story of that woman. There's a story of that boy in Kaitrana. So it's just relating to the reality of the things that are happening to people across the world.
Yeah. Do you have any books that have been signed by their author?
Born on a Tuesday is signed by El Nathan John. Where is that book? Born on a Tuesday, it's signed. Because also, so I was supposed to give Kintu, because I hear Jennifer is coming to the country, or she is in the country. I was gonna give Kintu to be signed. I want Samantha Power to sign for me a book, but Born on a Tuesday is actually signed. I don't know whether we can see it here. Born on a Tuesday. Okay, it's somewhere here. There it is. I've seen it. Yeah. So this is signed by. Oh gosh. Now people will see my height.
It's okay. Yeah.
So this is signed. Yeah. Lovely to have you here. I enjoy when he came to Kenya. So Born on a Tuesday. El Nathan John is also a very interesting author. He's funny. He's ridiculously funny. But I do hope to get more books signed. Maybe there's another book that's signed, there's another book that's signed actually. But I haven't read it though, by a Kenyan author. Yeah. But I haven't read it.
Tell me about this. Born on a Tuesday.
Born on a Tuesday. Oh gosh. Oh, when was the last time I read this book? So this book is about set up in Nigeria, and it's about was it Finding of Self? Yeah, so it's set up in Nigeria. It's a story of boys who are trying to figure themselves out, and then it's a story. Is it also during or after the Biafra War? I think. Oh gosh, it's been a minute. I feel like you've cornered me. It's one of those books I'm just like, you know. Yeah, so like extremism for Islam. You know, in Nigeria, like there's the whole Christian Islam like divide. So it's just a book that takes you through the story of these boys, and you know they go through this period of they trying to find self and self-identification and all that. But I wouldn't remember the details, to be honest. I read this book, and in fact, by the time El Nathan was signing this book in 2017, I had already read it. So it's been a minute.
Do you have any books you hope to read?
Here on my bookshelf? Oh, 100%. Okay, I really hope to read a Michelle Obama. I love Michelle. I haven't read her books, but I love listening to her podcast, even for this current book of hers. Like, I've listened to everything. I feel like I even know the book. I hope to read, of course, I hope to read her books. On my bookshelf, I hope to finish Ellen Johnson's This Child Will Be Great, because I know it's a brilliant book. It's up there. But the thing is, I started reading it at a point in life when I was going through stuff. So, sometimes when I was telling you, it's all about where am I at in life at that particular point. I hope to read that. I hope to read Wahome Mutahi's book, Whispers. I don't know whether Best of Whispers Politics. I don't know how you... Do you remember?
I remember Whispers. On the newspaper cover.
The newspaper. So I bought my dad that book because I remember growing up, and every Sunday my dad and their friends would huddle somewhere together and they'd whisper. So later is when I found out they were always reading that article and they go in and pack it as friends. But because it's Moi era, you don't want people to know what you guys are talking about. So they just whisper. I was fascinated by that. And I was like, Kwani, this guy, you're a child. Yeah. So I hope to read that book. Of course, I read a lot of his articles. I really hope to read a Christian book. I have Francine Rivers, The Lineage of Grace. This is not my book. It's a friend's book. But I hope to read a Christian book. The one thing I've said this year, I hope to read whether it's a fiction book or whether it's whatever, but I just hope to read a Christian book by the end of the year.
To somebody who wants to become a habitual reader, what tips would you give them?
Find a book that excites you. Don't go for mainstream, because I've realized that a lot of people who get bored with reading is because they go for mainstream books. They're like, oh, there's a book by Michelle Obama, let me go read it. Then you start reading it and you're like, it doesn't excite you, but you have to read for culture,
Yeah.
You have to read for the socials. Find a book that you read. People are embarrassed to talk about thriller books, or romance books. People want to... I'm judging. But so this has been my experience with people who are readers. It's, what are you reading? And someone's going to be like, I'm reading The Education of an Idealist by Samantha Power. Oh, dope. That's a very good book. And someone else who's reading a romance, like I am reading Part of Your World. What are you reading? Part of Your World. Oh, what's that about? Oh, it's a romance. It's a romance. It's a funny romance. It's just, there's nothing deep. I mean, there are deep things in the book because, fiction comes from reality. But, I mean, you wouldn't be considered as a serious reader. But here's the thing, read things that excite you. If you want to be a reader, just read things that excite you. If mainstream excites you, then read that. But if you love thrillers, if your juices are bubbled by romance books, go ahead and read that.
Yeah.
And that's how you find your rhythm in reading. Because I found my rhythm in reading through fiction. And I slowly graduated to books and I was like, I'd love to read this. I can't remember the first memoir I ever read, actually. I don't know. And I'd probably want to try and figure out what was the first memoir that I ever read. But that's the thing. It gets you into a flow of you even enjoying books that are beyond the scope of what you'd like to read.
Yeah. And you've mentioned a couple of times that you're in a book club. Tell us about that. How has that also either built or shaped or helped my
reading culture?
Yeah.
So the thing about the book club, so this was started in 2017, I believe, by Joanne, Joanne Corrie. So she started this book club. I remember, and we joke about it, like how we had to fill questionnaires. There was an age thing. And I think it's a really good thing. And you have, of course, to be a reader. People love the idea of being in book clubs. I get a lot of people, when I post about our book club meetups, because we've been meeting every month. Sometimes we can skip, but I get people saying, Corrie, I'd like to join your book club. And I'm like, you can come as a guest. Because people love the idea of being in a book club, of being part of something, but you don't want to put the work into being that thing. So we've been together for that long till now. So it morphed from just being a book club where we're just meeting to read to we explore restaurants. If there are new restaurants in the city, we explore them, to promoting local bookstores. So if this month we're reading a book like The Sex Lives of African Women, I think we all bought it from, is it either Nuri or Somanami? So when we're reading a book, we promote also the local bookstore. Like, guys, this bookstore actually has this book, so it's in bulk. So are we 10? I think we're 10. We have 2 guys and the rest are ladies. So it also moved from that, like exploring restaurants, to also promoting local bookstores, to just having authentic, genuine conversations. It built friendships. It built careers because like we empower each other, we learn from each other, we grow from each other. It strengthened our faith in Christ and faith in God and whatever. And because all of us, I do believe, I think, and not even just that, and not just like the faith in Christ, it's just also just understanding religion, because we read books of extremes. And it just strengthened our understanding of the world, and we just unpack like things. In as much as we are Christians, we unpack things. We are flawed. We are a mess. Yeah. And sometimes we do dinners. Sometimes we can go drinking together. And it's just a safe space of... And with this we don't have a label.
Yeah, digital transformation. Books are going digital, going paperless. People are going audiobooks. And there's now the old school physical flip page. What's your preference?
Oh gosh, listen, I had that conversation yesterday with a friend. So we were reading these books and she was like, oh, Corrie, I'm really enjoying reading using my Kindle. And I'm like, that's me. Like when I travel, I love to travel with my Kindle and to read using my Kindle. But I still love paper. I still like to flip. I still like to read on my bed and my lamp is on and I'm just reading and I just feel good by touching books. And like I said, like when I look at books, I feel I'm at home. I feel some sort of safety. I just feel comfort. Yeah. Okay, so for audiobooks, I do memoirs. So here's what I do. And this is my trick. Some people will say I'm cheating. But this is my trick. I am not cheating. I am not cheating. So when I was reading Will Smith's book, it was a book for a book club. I didn't have time to read. It's a chunky book. So what I did, I bought it on Audible. And I'd read, like I'm cooking and I'm doing stuff, but I'm listening to it and I'm reading, like through the audio. But when I sit down, I'm like, okay, I'll flip it. There are times where I'll hear something and I write it on my phone, oh, this is chapter, So I go back to that place and I highlight it and I'm like, now sometimes there are things that you hear and you're like, Apana, let me read it. So I have a cheat code for some memoirs where I'll listen to them. And sometimes, listening to things, you don't forget them.
So what's the difference in experience?
For memoirs, I don't know. I think if the author has read the book, if the author is the one reading the book, you'll enjoy it. But if it's someone who's reading the book it's like reading a book, Will Smith's book, and then it's being read by a white woman. Can you imagine? How you're trying to get his vibe. You know who Will Smith is, and you're trying. Or it's like reading Hillary Clinton's book, audio, and it's being read by a black man. Something like that. So I think the experience for a memoir is listen to it when it's the author who's reading it. However, I have friends who do fiction, audio, and I don't know how to do that. I hope I don't get there because, hey, at that rate.
So the physical books can also be costly. So we live in a world where piracy is also a thing. What are your thoughts on that?
Let me tell you, I dislike that. I dislike piracy. Can you see that Chinua Achebe book? The one just there?
This one, Things Fall Apart.
Just open it. Do you wanna cry?
This is not Chinua Achebe.
Do you want to cry when you look at that book? So here's the thing. My dad is looking for this book. He really wants... And anyone who's listening to this podcast, if you know where I can get Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, hit my cup. So the thing is, I wanted to buy Dad that book. And so I looked for it everywhere. Nobody had it. But then this particular person actually had it. And I was like, who are you? That I don't know. And because we're not shaming... So I got the contacts from someone and so this person who apparently had that book. And as the book, and after I had paid, I was like, why do I feel like that's a pirated book? And it got here, I looked at it, and the first thing I did is whoever gave me the contact, I was just writing there and I was like, no, guys, let's not do this to books. Let's not. And it's a thing that's happening. And there's so many stores. And here's the thing. I feel like a lot of people who... I don't know whether it's people who are not readers.
Yeah.
Either they don't know. Like, I can touch a book like this and I'll tell you this book is a pirated? Like, it's so easy. Like, you've touched and you've seen, right?
Like, I think I met a very good number of Michelle Obama's Becoming that has been highly pirated.
And it looks terrible.
It looks...
And you see, that's the thing. Because books are aesthetic. They're beautiful. Why do... Like, even my old books. Can you see this book? How old this book is? Who's written this?
This is older than you.
Malcolm X. You know... Can you... It's older than me. You know, like, it's such an old book.
Yeah.
And, like, this is 1973, you know? It's such an old book, but I love the way it looks. I'd rather have a book that's looking like that than have a pirated book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Corrie, thank you so much for allowing us to travel with you across the globe.
It's been an honor.
We would sit here. There are still a lot of books that I feel
there's
like
so
I want
many
to talk
books.
about.
Oh gosh, there's so many
Barack
books.
Obama is just looking at me here.
Yeah,
With
Audacity of Hope.
Really,
I love that book.
You won't talk about
it. I love that book.
I've realized Obama is in very many shelves. But tell me about Audacity of Hope.
Audacity of Hope, and I'll make it very fast.
Right.
Audacity of Hope, I love this book because Obama wrote this, he wrote this book. I was actually going through a season of being audacious. And I just picked this book. And I don't know, it was just a thing that I picked this book. And Obama wrote this book when he was a senator. And whether he knew he was going to run for president or whatever, I don't know. It doesn't come off like he did. And what I love about this book is that the things that people don't like about Obama, you know, the war, the gay rights, all those things, he believed in them back then. He's not someone who went and changed. He's not someone who went and changed and became someone else when he was president. All those things, when you read the books, even before he was even a candidate for nothing, you know, in the Democrat to run for president, he wrote about those things. And for me, it's the one thing can you stick by the things you believe in? Do we have the guts to actually stick by the good values and things we believe in? We are too woke that I have to align and sound in a particular way. I admire people who are not, you know, moved by the external factors. Of course, there are things that, you know, you have to change. I mean, you can't be, you know, stuck to your own ways. The world is changing and sometimes you have to adjust. But there are core things that, you know, you cannot change about, you know, some values. And I just love how he still went with that. And he talks even about, he didn't like the war. He didn't like the Bush war. He says he didn't like it, but then he went and sent people to Afghanistan. I just love the imperfection of it. And for a man who is, like I told you, someone who is a nobody-ish to become something, for me, that's admirable because it tells me that I am a nobody. Nobody knows my name. But you know what? I can become somebody. And even if people don't know my name, in my small way, I can still change the world. Yeah.
I think that is where we ended. And give us one quote from which book as we close.
Pressure. Let me get you. It's pressure.
Yes.
Let me just do Hillary Clinton, right? Because it was open here, and it's a quote that I loved. So this was a quote that someone called Stella was giving at where Hillary went to boarding school, the girls' boarding school. I'm just going to read the whole of it. I know it's hard to admit, especially as wealthy students, but we all have a lot of flaws. We are incomplete, scratched up in some places, jagged around the edges. She referenced to emerald's value, the rarity, durability as a two-side of the coin analogy, bringing up its flaws that showed authenticity and character. I am attached to flaws. I am attached to damages. And I love that because we are not seamed. We are a work in progress. So, yeah, we all have a lot of flaws. We're incomplete, jagged around the edges.
Wow.
But we're a work in progress. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Corrie.
Thank you too.
A beautiful time spent by your show.
Welcome to my channel, people.
Allow us to come back sometime soon.
100%. Yeah. Oh, please.
There's still so much I'd want us to discuss.
You should do a podcast to the book club.
Right.
I'm happy to host.
All right.
And have the cameras and Make us famous.
Right?
Yeah.
Are you reading yet? would you love to read? Is there anything you're struggling to read? This is why we're here. So I hope you've enjoyed this conversation with Corrie, a climate communication specialist. Google that up. But I hope you've enjoyed the conversations. Thank you so much and see you on the next one.